Okay, we are going to get started. I want to again thank you all for joining us tonight for our virtual public meeting on future fair rules for the MBTA. My name is Lindsay Heffernan, and I'm the Acting Assistant General Manager for Policy at the T, and I'll be moderating tonight's meeting. And first, the MBTA team has a presentation. Just going to pause for 1 second and make sure. Can folks hear me? And our ASL interpreters, are you good to go? Can you hear me, Donald? Okay. First, the MBTA team has a presentation, and we're going to ask you to hold all your comments until the end. Second, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being audio and visually recorded and will be made available following the meeting. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few controls for folks who are not familiar with Zoom. We will have live language Spanish interpretation in tonight's meeting. I will explain how to select your preferred language now in English, and written instructions are provided on your screen now in Spanish. In your meeting or webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, please click the interpretation button. Then click the language that you would like to hear. Even participants listening in English should select English so that they can hear any comments being spoken in other languages during that portion of our event. This meeting also includes American Sign Language interpreters. I want to thank Donald Gibbons and Linda Gregorio for being with us this evening. The meeting host will spotlight the interpreters to ensure that they can be seen at all times. The ASL interpreters do expect to switch approximately every 15 to 20 minutes. And if at any point you cannot see the interpreter, please let tech support know using the chat. We also have closed captions for this meeting tonight. If you do not see the closed captions, please press the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen in order to get them started. If at any point during this meeting you have any technical questions about Zoom or the accessibility features of today's meeting, please chat tech support. It should be the first option in the chat feature to chat to tech support. And tonight, I'd like to welcome my colleagues from the T who are here to join us tonight to turn on their video and we can introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Lindsay Heffernan, the Acting Assistant General Manager for Policy, but I'm joined by 4 additional members of the T team, and I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves.
Good evening. My name is Andy Stuntz. I'm the Senior Manager of Fair Policy Analysis at the MBTA.
I'm Arthur Prokosh. I'm the Manager of Fair Tariff at the MBTA. In a nutshell, that means that I work on current fair rules and potential future fair rules to ensure our future fair system will implement them well.
Hi, and I'm Alistair Soares. I'm the Director and Head of the Rail Transformation Office.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Thomas. I'm the Manager of Policy Development and Outreach. Thank you for being here today.
Tonight, Anthony's playing a dual role of being tech support, so he'll be in the background if you need him. So let me quickly cover the agenda, and then I'm going to turn the majority of this presentation back to Andy, who just introduced himself. Tonight, I'm going to cover briefly what we're trying to achieve with fair transformation at the MBTA. Some of the planned changes that we have to fair rules is what we'll cover second. Then we'll have a chance to explain some opportunities for future fair rules and fair changes that we're thinking about in terms of the T staff. And then we'll turn what we hope is the majority of this evening back to all of you to hear from you about your thoughts about how we should be thinking about future fair rules and fair products. So, quick background. Fare transformation is a tool that the MBTA is using to increase future flexibility, achieve some of our important policy goals, and address a lot of rider frustrations. You have on your screen here quotes that come right out of the mouths of our riders and things that, in many cases, we are trying to improve upon. And so, we're trying to make our service faster, particularly on being able to make payment quicker and therefore make service faster. Make it easier to sign up for reduced fare programs, whether it's a senior program, somebody who has an individual with a disability, or our Youth Pass program. We want to make it easier to get a Charlie card. We've heard that those are too hard to get a hold of, and we want to make that simpler. We want to make it faster and easier to pay and give individuals more options to pay. And we want to allow for some future integrations potentially with other mobility services if it turns out that that's something that's important to the public. So why do we need to change our fare rules? Changes to sales and payment options in the new system can bring a lot of benefits, but it's definitely going to require some adjustments for how things work today. The system design requires us to make some changes to ensure that it works as intended, but it also enables us to think about some future changes and how those could work for the MBTA riders. We are ultimately trying to provide a good option for all of our riders, and we're hoping that your feedback is going to help us to refine our plans and guide our future work. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Andy Stunts, who is going to go through the majority of our presentation this evening.
Thank you, Lindsay. As Lindsay mentioned, there will be 2 sections of our presentation that I'll go through before the feedback period. And this first section will be about planned changes to fare rules, which mostly relate to fare cards. And another section will be about possibilities for new fare rules in the future. So for this section, I'll go through 6 slides describing planned changes to fare rules related to fare cards and payment methods. We'll move to the next slide, Lindsay. Thanks. One change coming in the future in 2023 is that there will be new ways to pay your MBTA fares. Today, the options for paying your fare are a plastic Charlie card, a Charlie ticket, or cash on board. In the future, we'll be introducing new payment options to tap when you ride, which are shown here in the images across the bottom of the slide. There will be new physical Charlie cards available at fare vending machines and other sales locations. There will be a virtual Charlie card that can be loaded to a mobile device. Riders will be able to tap a contactless credit card directly to ride. And riders will also be able to tap a mobile device with Apple Pay, Google Pay, or Samsung Pay directly in order to ride. Move to the next slide. A second change in the future fare system is to onboard cash payment. Currently, riders can pay in cash onboard buses and Surface Green Line and Commuter Rail. One downside of onboard cash payment is that it slows down boarding, which can lead to lines and slower service. So as part of fare transformation, we will be eliminating onboard cash payment in the future, and riders will instead need to load money to their Charlie card before boarding at an expanded network of fare vending machines and retail locations, or using a new mobile app and website. In combination with moving to all-door boarding on buses and Surface Green Line, eliminating onboard cash payment is expected to significantly speed up our bus service. So we're excited about that future improvement in service for all of our bus riders. This is an important change, and we have had a number of past public meetings focused on the expansion of our sales network to ensure that we're providing convenient options for riders who use cash to pay their fares. If you would like to provide input on that topic, we would invite you to visit the link that's shown on this slide here. A third change to fare rules coming in 2023 is one more trip protection. This is a brand new feature of Charlie cards in our future system that works differently from Charlie cards today. Today, if you show up at the T to ride and realize that your balance on your Charlie card or your Charlie ticket is low, you would need to load your card or pay in cash. If you don't have any cash or a way to load your card, you're out of luck at that point. In the future, we will be implementing one more trip protection so that you won't get stranded without a way to pay, even if your balance is low. This is especially helpful as we remove cash payment from onboard vehicles in order to speed up service. The illustration on this slide shows how this will work in the future. You might show up at a bus stop and realize you forgot to load your Charlie card, so the card has $0 on it. Because you have one more trip protection in the future, you can go ahead and board the bus and tap to pay like usual, even though you have a $0 balance, and your card will go into the negative by a bus fare, negative $1.70. You will be able to complete your trip on bus and subway, even if it requires a transfer. So in this case, if you transfer to subway and tap as usual, your card will continue to go negative, this time by a subway fare, negative $2.40. So instead of being stranded, you were able to take your final trip home or wherever you were going. And you don't need to get a new card. You will just need to pay back the fare before you take your next trip by adding money at a fare vending machine, a retail location, on our new mobile app, or on our new website. Moving to a fourth change to fare rules, charging for Charlie cards. Today, Charlie cards are free, but if you've ever gone looking for a Charlie card, you may have found that they can be difficult to find. In the future, we're going to make it easy to find a Charlie card by making them available for purchase for $5 in every fare vending machine, at every Charlie retail location, and in virtual form on your smartphone. The one-time $5 fee will cover both the cost of the card and the one more trip protection that we described on the last slide. Even a one-time fee of $5 could be a burden for some of our riders. So we will be providing all of our reduced fare program participants with a Charlie card for free. And we'll be partnering with local organizations to also distribute cards at no cost to low-income riders in their communities. One of the areas where we're looking for feedback is about the best way for us to do that, how to best get free cards to riders who need them. And specifically, when we get to the feedback period, would be happy to hear which local organizations might be effective partners for reaching low-income riders in their communities. A fifth change to fare rules is integration of commuter rail and ferry. Today, you usually can't use the same fare card across all MBTA services. The only way currently to use a single fare card on bus, subway, ferry, and commuter rail is if you have a monthly pass on a Charlie ticket, or if you receive a monthly pass printed on a Charlie card through one of our pass programs. In the future, when we integrate commuter rail and ferry into our new fare system in 2024, you will be able to tap the same fare card, mobile wallet, or contactless credit card on all modes, including commuter rail and ferry. Our MBTA commuter rail fares are based on the distance you travel, and more specifically, the zones where you start and end your trip. And the diagram on the slide here shows how that will work in the future with tapping. Instead of having your ticket collected on board by a conductor, in the future fare system, you'll tap at a gate or a platform validator before you board. You'll then get on the commuter rail train and take your ride. A conductor might verify that you tapped before boarding while you're riding using a special handheld device. And after you get off, you'll tap again at your destination. By tapping on and off commuter rail, you'll be able to use the same stored value in your account to ride on bus, subway, commuter rail, and ferry. The sixth and last change to fare rules in this section is that each rider will need their own fare card. Today, if you're traveling on the MBTA with a friend or family member, you can share a single Charlie card or Charlie ticket. For example, at the subway gates, you could tap once for your friend to enter, and then you could tap the same card again to enter yourself. In the future, that kind of card sharing will be prevented in order to enable several key benefits of the new system that we talked about on the previous slides. This will make sure that we can correctly price trips when we integrate commuter rail. It will allow us to introduce mobile and contactless payment without causing accidental charges. And it will help to ensure that everyone carries their own card as proof of payment for verification, especially on commuter rail, buses, and trolleys with all-door boarding. If it was difficult in the future to find a Charlie card like it sometimes is difficult today, requiring each rider to have their own card would be a big challenge. But in the future system, it will be much easier for everyone to get a card. You'll be able to purchase a card from any fare vending machine or retail location, to purchase a mobile Charlie card on your smartphone, or to use a contactless credit card or mobile wallet on your smartphone. Also, just as a reminder, children 11 and under will still ride free and will not need to have their own fare card in the future system. So a parent traveling with 1 or 2 children, age 11 and under, would only need to have a single fare card, just like today. Okay, so the second half of our presentation is about possibilities for new fare rules. The last section was about changes that are already planned for the future system, but this section is about possibilities for future changes that we're considering or trying to prioritize. When we consider or prioritize any possible changes to fare rules, we think about 3 high-level objectives for fare policy that were identified by the MBTA's Board of Directors in 2015. Those 3 objectives are increase revenue, improve service and customer experience, and advance social equity, environmental, and regional economic goals. We want any changes to our fares to advance those objectives. However, as you can probably see right away, proposals to change our fares usually create trade-offs between the different objectives, and we need to consider those trade-offs. And after MBTA staff like myself and others in the meeting tonight analyze possible fare changes, the MBTA's board ultimately needs to vote to decide on any changes to MBTA fares. So there are two areas of possible new fares that we're going to cover tonight. And the first is focusing in on transfer rules. Today, there's a limited set of free or discounted transfers between bus and subway. And we do not provide any discounts for transfers between bus or subway and commuter rail or ferry. One sort of exception to that is that passes provide unlimited transfers wherever they're valid. So if you have a commuter rail pass today, you can transfer as many times as you want between commuter rail and subway, as long as you're using the pass. Transfer rules can be a point of pain or confusion, so we're considering options for introducing new transfer discounts to address pain points or to simplify our transfer rules as we move to our new fare system in the future. A couple examples of that on bus and subway. Our current transfer rules typically allow taking one complete trip on bus and subway, but generally do not allow a stopover in the middle of a trip or looping back to take a quick round trip. So when we roll out our new fare system on bus and subway in 2023, we're considering adding some additional transfers or stopovers. For example, currently, if you ride on 3 different bus routes within a couple hours, you get a free transfer to the second bus, but not to the third bus. So we could potentially allow that third bus to also be a free transfer in the future. Another example, currently, if you ride a bus, stop for a quick errand, and then you tap on another bus on the same route, you do not get a transfer discount. However, we could consider allowing a free transfer in that situation in the future. For commuter rail and ferry, our current fare system doesn't allow us to provide discounts for transfers between bus or subway and commuter rail. So for rollout of our new fare system on commuter rail and ferry in 2024, when we integrate those with other MBTA modes, we're considering whether to introduce discounts for those transfers. The box here on the slide shows a few of the considerations that we're thinking about for potential transfer rule changes. And when we're going to open up for feedback and questions in a few minutes at the end, we would love to hear your input on these at that point. So a few considerations are, what are the biggest pain points in our transfer rules? What are the longest trips that we should keep in mind as we think about transfer rule changes? And if we aren't able to add all of the new transfer discounts, how should we prioritize which ones to add? For the next couple of slides, I'm just going to flip past them for now, but we copied a map of the subway and bus system, and then a map of the commuter rail system into the slides in case it's useful to look back at these later. When we're talking about transfers, it can sometimes be helpful to look at a map.
Andy, I'm just going to pause for a quick second so our interpreters can switch. I think our pins might have gone away and they maybe can't see each other now. Yep, you're good, Linda. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, great. The second area of possible new fare rules is basically everything else other than transfers. So all of the other potential future fares, products, and integrations that could be introduced at the MBTA. Our current fare technology has a lot of limitations for introducing new fares, products, and integrations. And we're looking forward to our future fare system providing additional flexibility to implement any changes that are approved by our board. Slightly longer term, after the new fare system has rolled out on MBTA services in 2023 and 24, the new system also provides the potential for integrations with other transit and mobility providers. A couple considerations on this topic shown in the box on the slide are what kinds of new fares and products and integrations our riders would most like to see on the MBTA in the future, and what objectives or strategies should the MBTA prioritize when deciding about future fares. So in a minute, we'll throw that open and would love to hear your ideas and what you think the MBTA should prioritize. But first, we have one more slide. To prompt your thinking and to give a sense of all of the different directions that future fare rules could go, here's a rundown of some fare concepts that the MBTA could evaluate. We're calling these fare concepts rather than fare changes or proposals because for the most part, these are about how our fares work, not necessarily about how low or high the dollar amounts are. So it will take some work for us to develop any of these from a concept into a fare proposal or some fare scenarios with specific prices. And that's a big part of why we're asking for your input. We want to help focus our efforts on the right fare concepts. So I'll just run down this list of examples of the kinds of changes that we could evaluate for the future. Changes to transfers, like what we discussed in the last topic, time of day pricing, day of week pricing, distance-based fares on bus or subway, direction-based fares, probably on radial services like express bus and commuter rail, changes to the way zones work on our commuter rail system, income-based fares, additional rolling period passes, new passes for our reduced fare riders, new types of passes or discounts for regular but not quite daily riders, getting rid of passes and implementing fare capping, new passes combining a transit pass with a parking pass, integrating fare payment with bike share, and integrating payment with ride hailing. These are all examples, and if you have other ideas, we would be glad to hear them. So we'll move to the feedback period now, and I'll hand back to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. So the MBTA is always excited to get any feedback from our riders and the public. But tonight in particular, we're interested, and we have a couple questions, some things that we are wondering, obviously anything that Andy shared. How can we effectively communicate the changes related to the fare cards that he talked about at the beginning of his presentation? How could we improve our plans for cards and payment options? And maybe as we asked, what are the best ways to get free Charlie cards into the hands of riders who need them? What are the biggest pain points in our current transfer policies on bus and subway and on commuter rail? And what other fare products, integrations, systems would you like us to be exploring once we have our new fare system in place? And just as a reminder on the timeline here for everybody, our new system will go live in 2023 on bus and rapid transit, and bring in commuter rail the following year in 2024. So the survey is here again. That's another way for you to give us feedback. But just to begin to open this up, let me cover a couple of things for ways you can give us comment this evening. Comments can be shared via the chat pod. We should be able to get to all of our comments this evening. We don't have too many folks on the call, and I just do want to remind everybody that all comments will be part of the meeting record and will be shared with MBTA leadership. To make a comment aloud, you're going to virtually raise your hand. I see we already have one person. I'll get to you in just a couple of moments. To do this on the computer, you can either press the Alt and the Y key, or you can click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and then select the raised hand button. On a mobile device, you're going to tap the raise hand button on the bottom center of your screen. And if you're on a phone, you're going to dial the *9. Once you raise your hand, you'll be added to the queue with others who have raised their hands, and I'll call on folks on a first come, first served basis. When it's your turn to speak, I'll say your last name, and then we'll let you know that I am unmuting you. If you're on a computer or mobile device, a box will pop up on the center of your screen, and you will need to confirm that you want to be unmuted before you begin speaking. If you're on the phone, an automated recording will let you know that you are unmuted, and you can begin to speak as soon as the recording finishes. Once you are unmuted, everybody in the meeting can hear you. Before making your comment, please slowly state your name and if you have any organizational affiliation. Please remember to speak slowly, as we have multiple interpreters working with us this evening. And I'd ask you to consider keeping your comments limited to no more than 2 minutes, so we can ensure that everyone gets a chance to speak. Once we've gone through the list of those who want to speak, feel free to raise your hand again, and we'll take your comments. So I will say that any of the individuals from the MBTA staff may join us as we get to any questions. So, what I have right now, let's see, I'm going to unmute last name DeCiccio. I'm afraid I may have mispronounced that. I apologize.
That's okay. It's Ralph DeChico. I'm affiliated with the City of Rivere's Commission on Disabilities Office.
Thank you for joining us. We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is concerned with a lot of calls that I've gotten some calls with the it's one of the products that you have. So that's why I wanted to get some feedback on it. It's the transportation access pass, the reduced cards that residents that apply for the application, and they have to physically come into the transportation building in Boston in order to get that card. They fill out the application either online or they send it in through the mail, but then they have to physically come into the transportation building to get the card, the picture or whatnot. But they're asked to send in something they could send in something with their picture if they have a handicap placard or whatnot. So I'm wondering if something can be changed so that they don't physically have to come into Boston, because usually what they have to do is they have to call for the ride to come into Boston. Whereas the reason why they want to get a pass is sometimes they're living near a commuter station that they want to be able to access using the trains or the buses. So it's a bit of an inconvenience for them to come into Boston to physically get that card where all the information is sent in, and they could send a copy of their placard in with their picture on it.
That's really helpful feedback. And and I'm not sure that I have anyone on this call is best suited for it, but I think I need to connect up with the folks who both run the TAP Pass and that eligibility process. We've gone through a lot of efforts, I know, to modernize our ability to apply for some of our other reduced fare programs. That one is unique, as I'm sure you're aware, as we
Yeah.
have wanting to make sure that people aren't able to ride the fixed route system, or excuse me, that's for the ride. So let me take that, and if you're comfortable and you can, if you would like and you want some more specific feedback, you feel free to drop in the chat your email right just to me, Ralph. It'll only go to me, not to everybody else, and we
Sure.
can try to get see what, if anything, is happening to help modernize that process.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not in a better position to speak
No, that is fine. That's fine.
on that one. All right. At this point, let's see. I have one person. Let's see. We have a question. What will happen to, this came through our chat, what will happen to monthly passes if one card works for all modes? How can a mode specific pass be presented? And Andy, can I turn that one over to you?
Sure, yes. So one card will work on all modes in that you can use the same card to load value and passes, and then use that card to tap on all of the modes. There will still be mode-specific passes. For example, you could load either a 7-day link pass to your card and use that to ride on bus and subway, or you could load a commuter rail weekend pass onto the same card in the future and use that to ride on commuter rail by tapping the same card. So there will still be mode-specific passes, but you'll be able to load all of them onto the same card in the future.
Thank you so much, Andy. I hope that's responsive for the person who asked the question. So I just want to remind folks, you can drop any questions or comments you have for us in the chat pod. You can also raise your hand under the reactions button, or if you are on a phone, by dialing *9 to raise your hand. And I see we have a raised hand, and I'm going to ask to unmute last name of Hancock.
Hi, my name is Justin Hancock, and I'm a student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and next year I'll be teaching at a public school in Hyde Park. The fare change that I think I'm personally most interested in is commuter rail fare zones. So I was really surprised to learn when I was looking up my commute that I'll have to be doing for the next few years probably, that Redville, which is the stop that I would be closest to the school that I'll be working at, is in zone 1, I believe, and not in zone 1A, even though all of the rest of the stops on the Fairmount line are in zone 1A. And so for me, that amounts to a difference of about $140 per month. And so I'm not sure of the details, but I don't necessarily see why fare zone changes would have to wait until the end of fare transformation and until the new fare system is rolled out. But I guess I just wanted to bring that up as something that I'm particularly worried or concerned about or confused about, and potentially wanted to ask if there are any plans for simplifying the fare zones or changing fares on the commuter rail in a shorter time frame than after the end of the rollout of the new fare system.
Thank you for your comment, and I know Andy was part of our commuter rail zone or fare study, which looked at the smoothing out of early zones. So Andy, do you want to say something about that, and also how we think about zone changes as compared to all of fare transformation?
Sure, yes, thank you for your comment. And it's a good question about the timing. That's correct that there are certainly some changes to fares that could happen before or during rollout of our future fare system. not all changes to our fares are limited by our current technology. And moving station zones is something that would be technically possible today. Our commuter rail stations are in zones based on distance to the downtown terminals. And the Fairmount line is one of the few exceptions to that. The exception is actually that the stations inbound from Reedville are far enough away that normally they would be outside of Zone 1A, but those were included in Zone 1A as part of the Fairmount line. So it does, I agree, it creates an awkward jump between Zone 1A and Reedville in Zone 2. The MBTA and MassDOT worked on a study of commuter rail fares that was released just before the pandemic, looking at some issues and areas for improvement in commuter rail fares. And that was one of the areas that we identified was trying to lessen that jump in fares between Zone 1A and Zones 1 and 2. So I appreciate the comment. It's a good question, and you're right that that is an area that there's already some active discussion on, and potentially could be movement to make changes on commuter rail before 2024 when the new fare system rolls out.
And Alistair, I see you've turned on your camera. Would you like to add a little bit more in terms of our long-term thinking about some of these locations along our urban network?
Yes, so I just wanted to build on that answer very quickly, which is that rail transformation has two concepts, one of which is moving from a commuter rail concept to a regional rail concept, and then secondly, the idea of running an urban rail service. And very specifically, the Fairmont line is targeted for urban rail. That means the whole line, including Reedville. And one of the directions from the board very early on this was to move to a more transit style fare structure. And that sounds like it would just meet the concern being raised here. And I'd also point out that while rail transformation has lots of hardware and sort of grand electrification aspects, there also is just a service level aspect to it. And part of that is improving the frequency on that line, and which will hopefully benefit you in the near future using existing equipment, and also to make changes such as changing the fare structure and also changing the time of day at which each of the stops are made as well. It's more of a clock face schedule, as we call it. So all those things are intended to be rolled out very soon. So it isn't necessarily linked to overall fare transformation.
So I think I see you're celebrating, Justin. So more to come. Some of those longer term changes on the commuter rail fare structure in complete transparency are not right around the corner, but are things that we are trying to explore and understand. Some connects to fare transformation and some connects, as Alistair said, to having a more robust dialogue about the costs and benefits and trade-offs of changing the fare structure on commuter rail. And congratulations on your graduation and getting a job. And now I'm going to have a question in the chat. What form of payment will visitors use? Will there be, in effect, a $5 premium on even one trip if they use a Charlie card rather than a credit card or phone? And I think, Andy, I'm going to turn that one over to you if I can.
Yes, thanks. So for visitors, there will be the option in the future system to use a contactless credit or debit card or a mobile wallet directly to tap. And if you just tapped once for a single ride, that would not include the $5 charge for a fare card, since you're sort of bringing your own card by using your contactless credit card or your mobile wallet. if in the future someone wanted to use a physical fare card or the virtual version of a Charlie card, then they would, for either of those cases, need to pay the $5 fee in order to cover the cost of the card and the one more trip protection. We do hope that most visitors would be able to hold on to their card and continue to use it in the future, even if only for occasional use.
Thanks, Andy. We have what I think is a comment that came through, and I'll just say it out loud for the purposes of everyone listening. Based on the brazen fare evasion, frequent driver forgiveness, and extremely infrequent enforcement I've seen for decades on the Green Line, I'm doubtful that spot checking and peer pressure will be successful in increasing fare collected for all-door boarding. However, all-door boarding is nevertheless highly desirable to speed boarding and reduce impossible squeeze-by experiences due to strollers, shopping carts, mobility aids, etc. I appreciate the comment. If you have been paying attention, we're doing lots of thinking about proof of payment and moving to all-door boarding and reducing fare evasion. And in fact, we had some public meetings about that last month, and then you can find a lot more on our website about the efforts that we have underway. I'm going to just remind people that they can raise their hand if they would like to speak. If you've already spoken and you want to speak again, I'm going to say feel free, as we have don't have any other hands raised right now, or you can send a chat either to the moderator. Oh, I thank you. Someone on the team added to our chat a place where you can learn more about some other aspects of fare transformation, particularly proof of payment, given the last comment. Let me go back here. Some areas of feedback that we are in particular seeking is how, any thoughts that folks have about how we could best communicate some of the changes and decisions that have been made, getting cards into the hands, particularly of lower income riders for whom the $5 might be a particular burden. Any particular transfer policies that are, I appreciate Mr. Hancock's comment about the commuter rail fares, but any other transfer policies that are points of pain in your travels, or any other future products, fares, or integrations that you'd like to see after the new system is in place? And one comment in the chat pod, maybe we should be reaching out to CAPIC and organizations such as that for free cards. I'm going to say to the person who commented, if you wouldn't mind telling me what CAPIC stands for. I think it's CAPIC. That's not one I'm familiar with, but thank you. We'll follow up. In addition, we have a question. Is it possible to transfer from the Green Line C train to the D without having to pay 2 separate fares? It seems unreasonable to pay $4.80 just to go one way in the same direction. And I'm wondering if, Andy, please feel free, go ahead, sir.
Sure. So currently, it's possible to transfer for free between the branches of the Green Line, but you do have to travel sometimes out of your way to go inbound to the trunk portion of the Green Line and transfer to another train behind the gates there. So it's a good question and a good idea. Generally, otherwise on subway you are able to transfer to take one trip on a single fare. So when folks do have to transfer like that between branches of the Green Line, I agree that it's unfortunate that we have to charge a second fare there. It will be a challenge technically to come up with a way to allow that transfer kind of on its own as an incremental improvement. However, if the MBTA was to make larger changes to transfer rules, it's possible that that transfer could be allowed in some other way in the future.
Thank you, Andy. And I am now going to unmute. You told me how to pronounce your last name, and I have already forgotten. I'm so sorry.
It's Chico.
Chico, sorry. I knew
It's
I
okay.
got it wrong, and I couldn't remember what I said.
Just to explain what CAPIC is, it's
Thank you.
Community Action Programs in Inner City is what CAPIC stands for. And it's community action programs. They assist people of low income, fuel assistance, Head Start preparations, and things of that nature. So if you just look up CAPIC and the thing, the other outreach may be for like MGH, Beth Israel. They have organizations with them. I'm just talking out of, because of my area, Revere. There's like Revere on the Move. They work with a lot of low income families, and these are the families that don't drive, and they usually depend on public transportation and have to pay for their rides. They have to pay for the transportation, the buses and whatnot. So that's who you want to outreach. We actually, back when they were talking about implementing this new fares rollout, we met with the MBTA in Revere when they were implementing the sidewalk stalls, kiosks that they were going to be putting in different locations and whatnot. We had brought a lot of these areas, and they were talking about mom and pop shops to distribute and sell the cards, and they were talking about low income. So we had given some of these suggestions so a lot of the healthcare agencies and things of that nature might be a place to reach out, because they'll know of the families that could be in need of these cards.
No, thank you so very much. I was scribbling and appreciate it. And community action programs, are they
CAPIC is located in Chelsea, Mass.
Is the Chelsea one? Is it the affiliated with the Mass Cap of the community? Well, we'll do more of our homework.
Yeah,
I guess.
there's probably a few of them. CAPIC is this area. There's probably so
Gotcha.
many throughout the state.
I think I'm familiar with their sort of the state level affiliate, but it's good to know, and we should look at all of the local ones as well. Thank you for all that feedback. That's really helpful.
No problem at all.
And I see I have another hand raised, so I'm going to unmute the last name, Osborne.
Hello, I was wondering what data you collect under the new system, and how that compares to what you used to do, and how you protect privacy there that way. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a first run at it. I'm going to let some of my other colleagues jump in as well. I would, as an update for folks, without a doubt, the new fare transformation system has the ability to have a lot more data collected, but at the same time, as an organization, and then particularly some of the folks on this call are involved in rewriting our rider privacy policy to account for that and to ensure that that is up to date. I'm going to offer anyone on our team who wants to suggest some of the types of data that are collected, and anybody who wants to speak to some of the privacy by design on the system as we have it, I'd also welcome you. Andy, I'm not sure if that's you or somebody else on this call.
Sure, I'm happy to take a crack at it. A few areas of data collection and privacy to note for the future system. One is account registration. So currently, we don't have the idea generally of an account that you would register to yourself with any personal information. That will be possible in the future system. However, it will not be required. So anyone will be able to travel anonymously without ever providing any personal information if they choose. And we've been working hard to make sure that the designs for the ways that you can use your account work well for people who choose not to provide that information. So you'll still be able to, for example, go online to check your balance, to load money to your card in a way that doesn't require you to provide that personal information. If you do register an account, there are also going to be mechanisms for protecting your account information and privacy. And in general, the standard that's built in from the beginning of the contract for implementation of the new system is that you have to be the one to access your account. So that would mean you have to either have your card in your hand, or if you've set up a PIN or a password for your account, that you would need to have that to access any information about your fare card or your account. One other aspect of the system has to do with storing travel data. So as we do now, the future system will also record tap information that's used in all kinds of ways to run the system, like calculating and charging fares. But to ensure that privacy is protected, there are also some strict requirements built into the contract to make sure that your travel data is never associated with any personal information, for example, your account registration information, unless you provide a consent or explicitly allow sharing of that data for some particular purpose. For example, if you wanted to receive personalized notifications based on your tap history, you might elect to share that information, but otherwise the travel data is disassociated from your personal data. Hopefully that's responsive. I'll ask anyone else on the team to please jump in and fill other details that I've missed.
So I just wanted to underline one point about not sharing or storing personal data, and that includes credit card data. That any credit card data, since that's in many ways a new functionality to be able to use credit cards directly, rather than just when you're buying a Charlie card in the new system. And that information is only stored encrypted, and the credit card information is not retained in any way. So there's a number of controls in place to ensure that any reports that our vendor has, any access that they have, and any reports that the MBTA has do not contain personally identifiable information, including the the full account number of one's Charlie card or one's credit card.
And I will add one more note for you, and that is that the recent passes of the transportation bond bill also added protections by statute and explicitly excluded fare collection data from public records requests, so that if the T were, somebody said, I want to get a public records request to the T, they couldn't ask for Lindsay Heffernan's travel data. That would be explicitly excluded, which was a provision in the law that the MBTA sought to have changed. It also tightened up the ways in which law enforcement can gain access to any of that data as well, requiring a warrant by a judge. So lots of different things going on to try to both build in privacy by design, give riders more control over their data, and then various statutory changes happening at the same time. I see a raised hand, and I'm going to ask to unmute last name Baxter.
But they talk about places where they can give out the low income cards. One place that us T-riders use is like the ABC, Action for Boston Community Development in Boston, because they often, the fuel assistance people sometimes are a little bit, they don't qualify for welfare. they help with tax things. So they have your income because they help with tax and everything. So they can get a lot of people that are still low income, and we can even make the low income fare a little bit higher income. They don't receive the other benefits. Because the people we were trying to use like reports that proof they went to night school or something. Other ways to get people that don't, like somebody can qualify for Section 8, but there's an eight-year waiting list. And so some people aren't getting, like some low income people that aren't getting those other benefits. ABCD is one place.
Okay. And what I'm hearing you're suggesting is that we should look at all kinds of different both benefit programs, but programs that are designed for potentially lower income folks. I hadn't thought about the night school. That's a really helpful suggestion, and other places where we could help to get cards into the hands of our riders.
And I wasn't thinking just cards too, is also to determine whether they're eligible or not. So we're trying to get as many people to be eligible as we can, because the only trouble, a lot of things, they have a cutoff line. Somebody could be just a few dollars over the cutoff line.
Yep.
And the $100 is quite a bit. $90 is quite a bit of money, and that, I mean, could affect a lot of people. I think you'd have to up it a little more than you want a little. You'd want a higher income level to qualify than you would with the regular programs.
Okay. I think I understand. And you're talking both here. So you're talking about both about getting free cards, but also a potential means tested fare program and what eligibility standards we use there. Sure. Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Baxter. I appreciate it. We have another comment that came through the chat box, and that is being able to pause and resume trips on the same line, double back if necessary, and transfer more liberally between lines is probably a boon for riders using wheelchairs who can only use some stations and stops, and for whom transferring over streets between stations and stops can be arduous or impossible, particularly in snow or heavy rain. Andy, if you have some comment to give back to that, it's helpful feedback, but if you have any thoughts, please feel free.
Yes, thank you. I don't have much specific other than to say thank you for the comment. It's a great one, thinking about the cases where our riders might be forced to make an unusual transfer, because those are often the cases where we currently charge 2 fares, even though someone is taking 1 trip. So that's a great comment, and we'll need to go back and think about the cases where that happens. And I think it's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's something we can bring up with our accessibility folks as well, and make sure we're thinking about accessibility and transfers as connected. Well, I want to appreciate that it's a little after 7 o'clock and I don't see any more hands raised. A couple of things in the chat pot. There is a link to our a survey that we will have open for a little bit longer to give us feedback about our fare rules. And as Andy mentioned, the feedback that we get is going to help us figure out which pieces of analysis should we be doing to determine the ridership implications, the revenue implications, be able to answer all of the questions that we get whenever we want to change any of these rules that impact people. You can also email the email on our screen, publicengagement@mbta.com. We very, very much appreciate your all being with us this evening. A couple of the folks from the T staff are going to stay on for a minute or two in case anyone just wanted to give their comment with a slightly smaller audience. But otherwise, I'm going to say thank you to our interpreters. Thank you to the MBTA staff who are here. But most importantly, thank you to all of you for joining us and spending a little over an hour of your evening with us this evening. And I wish you all a very good night. If there's others you think would like to be part of this conversation, we will be here again on Thursday, May 27th. So please feel free to let us know. Otherwise, we'll stay on for 1 more minute and see if anybody raises their hands. But I want to say thank you and good night. I've got two comments that have come in. Ms. Baxter, I'm going to unmute you, and then I'm going to have one more comment that came in on the chat bot. You should be able to unmute.
Okay, one thing I mentioned too, as T-Riders Union about the commuter rail zones, we're thinking like Lynn's low income in Chelsea. And sometimes one's a 1A zone, another's a 1 zone. So you're just going a short distance between the two things, but you're charged a higher zone fee. And like even Redville's within the city. So we kind of think of those should be put in the 1A, or we think also like an MBTA fare, because they're going about the same distance as the MBTA when you're only going a couple, and like Chelsea, Lynn, those are lower class communities, and because we are consideration of thinking the income basis and how far they're traveling. Like Lynn to Chelsea is not so far as changing the zone, the commuter rail zones.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to comment, helpful feedback? I don't know if you have any comment back from Ms. Baxter about the zone study.
Yes, thank you for that comment. Right, similar to the comment earlier about Reedville, certainly Chelsea and Lynn is another place where that big jump between zone 1A fares and zone 1 and 2 fares it is a challenge right now. The commuter rail fare study that I mentioned earlier is available online. It was posted to the MBTA's, well, I guess MassDOT OPMI data blog. So I would invite you to take a look at that. We did recommend in that study trying to shrink the jump in fare between zone 1A and zones 1 and 2, which would reduce that fare between Chelsea and Lynn. Another relevant recommendation in that study was to look into off-peak and reverse commute fares, which could be relevant for some rides between Chelsea and Lynn, or at some of the other stations where there's a lot of ridership, a short distance, but across that line between zone 1A and zone 1. So appreciate the comment. We are definitely thinking about those problems and hope that we can chip away at them in future fare changes.
And Lindsay, I'll just add that we're also studying short journeys within a zone for commuter rail, and whether there's any opportunities to optimize the approach to that as well, because that's part of this regional rail concept that is not just about journeys from outside to a Boston termini. It is actually between stations as well. So that both of those could lead to fare products that would help with this kind of journey. And again, this is part of the urban rail part of the network. So the intent is to also increase frequency of service as well on the service side.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Andy. And I think the last comment that we have goes back to the newer fare media. How will fare verification work if someone pays using a contactless credit card? Compared to using a Charlie card, will using a credit card be slower when boarding or lead to less revenue for the MBTA? If so, will there be measures to encourage using a Charlie card instead? And Andy, I'm not sure if you're the best one or if we want Anthony, but please feel free, give it a run.
Sure, thanks, Lizzie. So the first piece of that question, how will fare verification work if someone pays using a contactless credit card? It will look exactly the same as someone who used a Charlie card. Verification in the future will involve verification staff member asking you to tap your card, whatever you use to ride, to a handheld device in order to check whether you tapped and paid and are valid to be riding where you're being verified. So you would, in that case, if you were using a contactless credit card, you would just tap that to the handheld device. The second part of that question, will using a credit card be slower when boarding or lead to less revenue? Would the MBTA encourage using a Charlie card instead? In general, the design of the future system has been neutral in terms of what type of card our riders want to use. So we are not planning to have any difference in fare, for example, between contactless credit cards and Charlie cards. The speed when you tap should be the same for contactless credit or mobile wallets and Charlie cards. And there will not be any kind of large scale push to get our riders onto one type of card versus another. We're trying to open up lots of good options so that everyone can choose the card that's most convenient for them.
And I'd just like to add, as a customer, I've used this system in London, which is identical technology effectively. And I can say it's just as quick, and I've used contactless credit cards on that system. And it works just as well. And there is no, well, they have a different set of fare rules, but it works very well, and it's very popular.
Thank you. Thank you both. At this point in time, I don't see any other comments, and so I'll leave this email up. Welcome any further comments and encourage people to take our survey. But at this point, I'd like to say thank you for being here, and we hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you so very much. Good night.